Hello, everyone. I'm Helen McGrath, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and I'm joined this week by Dennis Hall, our Bulletin Editor. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, Helen.
And welcome back to the vlog. Brilliant to have you back.
Thank you very much. All ready to go.
Excellent. So what have you got for us this week?
Well, we return this week to the issues emerging from the Post Office Horizon scandal. The current phase, which is currently ongoing, has seen some remarkable and extraordinary revelations concerning the interplay of roles between senior executives and their top legal advisors. So we'll take a look at what's happening at the inquiry. But what does this all mean, and why does it matter to local government? Well, our sector, of course, is part of the in-house legal spectrum. Indeed, it's a large part of that spectrum, and the issues in the inquiry relate to professional and ethical considerations of a kind that resonate with the environment in which many of our members work. General counsel and monitoring officers have very similar responsibilities for governance. The challenges and problems of speaking to power are the same, whether it's general counsel speaking to a managing director or a monitoring officer advising a council chief executive or council leader. And change to the professional rules and ethical framework governing in-house lawyers now seems inevitable. The Legal Services Board, the SRA, and indeed the Law Society are all committed to a complete overhaul of the professional rules and support mechanisms for in-house lawyers. Now, the Law Society have just announced that they're planning new pathways to assist in-house lawyers in the situations that I've just described. And we will take a look at these as well. Helen.
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting time with the inquiry, hasn't it? I think maybe we should start by looking at what the latest is, actually. What's the latest news? I see that former Post Office GC Susan, I'm going to say Crichton, is that the correct pronunciation? Crichton. I should know that. I used to watch a lot of Red Dwarf. She's been in the headlines, hasn't she?
Well, indeed she has. And I have to say, this is all cringing stuff.
Yes.
Former Post Office Chief Executive Paula Venables expressed frustration that her general counsel put her professional obligations above the interests of the business, the public inquiry into the Horizon scandal heard a couple of weeks ago. Now, the relationship between Venables and Susan Crichton deteriorated rapidly in the middle of 2013 after the lawyer was shut out of a board meeting. This is what the inquiry heard. And this was despite Crichton being listed on the meeting agenda as presenting a paper about the review of the Horizon IT system.
Well, it might be that, I mean, that smacks of some of the challenges we see that MOs face. I know that Venables wrote in a meeting note, this came out in the inquiry, that Crichton was, quote, possibly more loyal to her professional conduct requirements and put her integrity as a lawyer above the interests of the business. I mean, no words, Dennis.
And you know, this really does get to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? Individual lawyers were always to be scrutinized for their role in the Post Office Horizon scandal. But the past few weeks of evidence featuring two former general counsel and a current head of legal has put the very essence of being a lawyer under the spotlight.
Absolutely. Well, there were even more developments. I understand by the end of last week, I was following the Gazette. I've been following the Gazette. They've been doing some pretty good updates in relation to the inquiry. And obviously they're taking a very keen interest, and they reported that the former solicitor advising the post office, one Martin Smith, was forced to deny at the inquiry that disclosure refusals were a tactic to stop sub-postmasters being able to defend themselves. Mr. Smith said that a robust stance was taken because he had been continuously assured by the post office that Horizon data was reliable.
Well, indeed, this Mr. Smith went much further than that. It also emerged that Smith and barrister Simon Clark met with a judge at Birmingham Crown Court in 2013 on the eve of a trial of a sub-postmaster accused of theft. They applied for a public interest immunity concerning that key report, if you remember, from the forensic accountant's second sight. Now, this blew everything apart, you'll remember. They were successful in persuading the judge that the defence solicitors should not be made aware of that report.
Yeah, I read that, Dennis. And whilst Mr. Smith accepted he was the instructing solicitor on the case, he said he was only present at the meeting to take notes, and he could not remember any details of what was said to the judge.
Well, Now, regulation of and support for in-house lawyers is front and centre of all the regulators and professional bodies, as I've mentioned. And in the news last week was the Law Society announcement of a new in-house lawyer survey. Helen, I know you've been looking at this.
Yes, in-house solicitors have been invited to contribute to a study of ethical issues confronting lawyers in the growing sector, we should say. The results of the survey opened by the Law Society last week will contribute to a project to develop an ethical practice framework for in-house lawyers. The project is being carried out, as I understand it, by the Interdisciplinary Ethics Applied Centre, which is located at the University of Leeds, working in partnership with the Law Society of England and Wales. Now, Nick Emerson, who is the Law Society president, said, and I'll just quote him now, as both legal advisors and business advisors to their employers, in-house solicitors are in a unique position, which can often give rise to a competing pressures and ethical dilemmas. And we know ethics is a key topic the profession would like more support on. And I think this is great that the SRA are doing this work and that the Law Society are taking such an interest, because, of course, these huge scandals, which is what the inquiry is reflecting really bad on the reputation of lawyers, isn't it? So
It is indeed, as you say, and that's why regulation is really inevitable. I think our members will be interested in the partnership between the Law Society and the University of Leeds. There is this new resource that's being planned, and the survey will be part of the preparation for those new arrangements. Members should take a look at that, because it is about supporting in-house members with the day-to-day challenges that they face. And this resource is one, hopefully, they can use and also trust.
well, members haven't got long to respond. The survey closes on the 10th of May. Details are in the bulletin if people want a link to it, and we would encourage everyone to take the time to respond, because it's really important to inform that piece of work. Now, it wasn't just the lawyers, was it, Dennis? Well, it was, but there were other elements to the inquiry that we learned last week. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, indeed. And in another hearing, and I saw some of this, Post Office management stalwart Angela van den Bogerd conceded that legal professional privilege may have been used as a cloak to stop documents from being disclosed to sub-postmasters who were considering litigation as long ago as 2011. Emily Springford, a principal lawyer with the Post Office, had emailed Bogerd saying that a document would be deemed privileged only if its dominant purpose was to give or receive legal advice. If the dominant purpose was not to obtain legal advice, Springford advised that staff should try to structure the document in such a way that its dominant purpose can be said to be evidence gathering for use in the litigation. Now, Bogerd cascaded this information down to colleagues, telling them to preserve all documents and mark communications in relation to these cases as legally privileged and confidential. And the inquiry heard that Springford had advised staff to think very carefully before committing to writing anything relating to these issues, which is critical of our own processes, including emails, reports, or briefing notes, her email said.
Well, the curious advice note was certainly kept by those who received it, but it's come out into the inquiry, hasn't it? Much to her embarrassment, I imagine. Well, I hope so.
Well, indeed, and you're quite right. And Tim Maloney, King's Counsel at the inquiry, representing sub-postmaster, said the instruction was far from lawful, far from open, and certainly not transparent. And the inquiry also heard that Chris Ojard, General Counsel from 2013 to 2015, used his first board paper presentation to tell members there were no systemic or fundamental flaws in the Horizon review processes, a statement that he would come to regret, I'm sure. And there's, of course, Helen, in all of this, there's much more for LLG to consider going forward. So what's the plan?
Well, we are working with the SRA, the LSB, Bar Council, and Silex around ethical conduct and standards, and we'll certainly be covering ethics at our governance conference. But the standards weave all the way through the spring conference, of course, which is happening on the 7th of June in Leeds. We've got our ongoing code of practice for statutory officers, but we will be moving to look at specific guidance for monitoring officers, in particular, certainly what they should do when they have concerns but no one is listening, or that the culture is making them uncomfortable and there are red flags, basically. So we've got a lot of work streams, and the membership will learn more about those throughout the coming year.
Well, and finally on this, I should mention that the much awaited evidence from Post Office former Chief Paula Venables is due to be heard at the end of May. So there'll be immense interest in what she has to say about all of the stories so far.
Well, we'll be back again to cover it, of course, Dennis. And we're going to convene a panel of the great and the good to really examine the lessons learned once this part of the inquiry concludes. And we'll record that and make sure that members can gain access to it. So on that note, you can get coverage of many more items from the bulletin and by listening to the Grapevine podcast, which is also available on Spotify. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too.